John Doolittle, who serves as the president of Mosaic Medical Center in Albany, also known as MMCA, formerly known as Northwest Medical Center, which provides care for the people of Northwest Missouri through Critical Access Hospital located in Albany, Missouri, primary care clinics in 4 communities, a home health agency, and a variety of school and community partnerships. Since his tenure began in July of 2010, MMCA has completed the implementation of a comprehensive electronic health record system, revised its governance structure to include physician leadership on its board of directors, expanded its primary care offerings, added outpatient services through traditional and telehealth delivery mechanisms, and grown its inpatient market share. Beginning December 29th of 2014, MMCA began to operate as part of Mosaic Life Care. John is blessed to be helping Mosaic and his home region work together to build an exemplar site for rural life care. He also is pleased to be serving as the 2021 chairman of the Missouri Hospital Association Board of Trustees. John has the privilege of serving his community from an office in the hospital where he was born. His prior healthcare experience includes over 11 years working in a variety of roles with the Cerner Corporation, a Kansas City-based healthcare information systems company, and the completion of an administrative fellowship with Mosaic. Mr. Doolittle has worked for the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City at the beginning of his career. He earned his bachelor's degree from Harvard University, where he concentrated in government. At home in Albany, John and his wife, Jenny, spend time with their family and friends, including their 6 children. The 2 are active in their church, the Albany schools, scouting, and a wide variety of athletic and outdoor pursuits. This part is kind of funny to me. He was worried about how he was going to teach his children the meaning of unconditional love when the Kansas City Royals became lovable. But that problem seems to have resolved itself. And I guess you could say that about the Chiefs too, John. So everyone, welcome John. And John, I will hand it over to you. You should have the ability to share your screen. And okay. I want to remind everybody that we are recording this. So if you want to go back and listen to it at a later date as well, we will have that available to you all shortly.
All right. Well, Melissa, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining in. I should write a longer bio, and that way wouldn't ever have to actually give a presentation. You just read the bio and then everybody could go to dinner and drinks. And I think that might boost my my survey results, maybe, I'm not sure. Several familiar names, and some of you, I think, have actually heard parts of this presentation before. I try and have a lot of new stuff, but there's some of this stuff that's so good that I really want to share it as many times as I can. My sincere hope is that some of the details are the same as I said they were the last time you heard this presentation. It might hurt my ratings as an authentic leader if I'm found to be just making stuff up situationally. But I'm certainly hopeful that that what we visit about today is useful and enjoyable for you. And I will tell you, just genuinely, I think I'm one of my organization's biggest cheerleaders. I won't say I'm its biggest cheerleader because there are some really sweet people who send us very nice notes from time to time. But rural healthcare has become my life, and I just believe so thoroughly that it's a great way to spend that life. And I'm surrounded by amazing caregivers. We had a leadership meeting today. It's the last thing I did before I hopped in my car and drove to Jeff City. And we started that leadership meeting with just pure affirmation and love. We always do an icebreaker. And sometimes it's like, oh, tell us about your favorite movie, or what would your favorite superpower be, or something like that. And today it was super simple. It was just, guys, it's been a tough year. It's been an incredibly difficult 13 months. It's still tough. It's still uncertain. We're tired. Wouldn't it be fun if we all just sat around and said nice things about each other for a little bit? So we kicked off a leadership meeting today with individuals. We just went around the room and everybody got to pick somebody in the room and just say something that they really appreciated about that person. And the stories that were generated, of course, were wonderful. But aside from that, we all left there with this feeling of what an absolute honor and pleasure it is to be surrounded by caregivers. And my sincere hope, and we expressed this at the time, was each one of those people and their families is better off because of what they're choosing to do and where they're choosing to do it. And being part of a rural care team is something that I think can grant people professional satisfaction. But beyond that, I think it really changes who you are. And my hope here is that by sharing some of these stories about the amazing things that our crew has done, maybe you'll be able to imagine wanting to experience something like that yourself. And that really is the whole point of this presentation. This is John Bragg on his team, and try and do it in a way that's entertaining and compelling for you. So I'm gonna try and do the share screen here. I've got some slides pulled up. I can still see me, which is nice, and I can see my first slide. Can you guys see it? Somebody give me a thumbs up. You see a picture of my hospital? All right.
Yes, we do.
Here we go. So let's see now if I can kind of brute force get to the next slide. Okay, so again, some of you have seen my presentation before. I should get away from this slide, but I just can't. Whenever I speak, I always want to start off by showing appreciation for the folks who invited me. So today, Melissa, Dr. Quinn, your teams, our friends at HRSA who are helping foot the bill for this. Thanks for affording me this opportunity. This sign just cracked me up. I think it's supposed to be two messages. We remember all who have served, and also hot breakfast. But when it all ran together that way and it became a message about remembering all who have served hot breakfast, it actually probably even meant more to me. Because just like I will tomorrow morning, I'm a big fan of hot hotel breakfast. But thank you, truly. This is always a tough one for me to show, but I like to show it. It's not always an easy thing to be involved in healthcare or in rural healthcare and rural life or any other job or pursuit that you choose. We had a really gifted artist in the administrative suite at the hospital a few years ago, and they started making caricatures of some of the other caregivers. And I said, "Oh, I'd like one of those." And so she did this, and I then changed my mind about wanting to see what others thought of me. And this is actually, I think, a really nice reminder of something that I try and impress on all of you. As leaders, whether you are a clinical caregiver, whether you're in administration, whether you're coming at it from a policy perspective or whatever else, there are a lot of folks who take their cues about how their day is going to go from how you present yourself and how you appear when you venture out into the hallway. And so I leave this here as a little bit of a reminder. It's actually a big part of my job to smile and help everybody feel like things are going to be okay. But this was probably a fair representation of how I was behaving at the time. And I use it as a little bit of a reminder, as Mater says in Cars, to not to. So we get into the meat of this thing a little bit. And that's a picture of high school student John Doolittle and his little sister, Kate. And it was the Albany Ledger is a weekly newspaper. You find those in a lot of small towns around, and we're no exception. We're actually lucky that we still have a weekly newspaper. But this is from about 1992, I think it says there. And it wasn't saved because I was in it. It was saved because Kate's grandma wanted to save all the pictures of Kate that she possibly could, and that's my little half sister. But she shared it back with me later. And as I started thinking about visiting with folks about rural health and rural life and trying to grow our own folks to take care of each other, I found the most depressing headline of all time, right? We were a student newspaper within our community's weekly, and the best headline we could come up with was "Students Plan to Move." And it's an entire article about people who were going to Albany High School who didn't know what they wanted to do when they grew up, but they knew they didn't want to be in Albany. And so that was the headline. And there was one especially prescient young man, me, who threw a quote out there at the time. And it said, after college, I'll probably look to start a career wherever the best opportunity presents itself. And if you remember my 20-minute long bio, I did end up in Kansas City for a while and worked for the Federal Reserve and worked for Cerner. I said, but when the time comes to start a family, I may very well return here because it's a great place to raise children. Well, it is. And I did. But I didn't really know for a long time that was going to happen. And I'll tell you a quick story of how it came to be, really. Not only did I certainly meet the right, well, girl at the time, the right woman, my wife, Jenny, who was featured quite a bit through the rest of this presentation. But also there were folks who really took an interest in me. And I tell their stories because, again, I want to remind myself to try and be similar to these great role models. And also I want to provide you encouragement to do this also. I'm where I am now, for better or for worse, largely influenced by two phone calls. The first one was on the 4th of July. I was at my grandma Doolittle's house. It was the summer before my senior year in high school. And a guy called me who I literally had never met. He was a friend of my dad's, but he was a doctor. And he's actually one of the team physicians for the Carolina Panthers football club. He had grown up in Kansas City, Kansas. He trained back east in Boston, ended up Johns Hopkins, and then on to the Carolinas. He's a very successful surgeon. And my dad, I think, had put him up to this. Dad knew I was going to be at grandma's on the 4th of July, and the phone rang there, and I talked to him, and he said, hey, John, I heard you have pretty good board scores. Yeah, I did okay. Where are you thinking about going to college? And I started listing off a few places. And he said, well, have you ever thought about heading back east to like an Ivy League school? And I said, well, no, I really haven't. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, mom and dad divorced a few years ago. We're not exactly flush with cash. I met a Harvard recruiter at Missouri Scholars Academy. I thought the guy was kind of a jerk. And I think I've got some other pretty good opportunities. So the main thing is, I just don't think even if I got into a place like that I could afford it. And the good doctor says, well, it's obvious you haven't done your homework. It's taken back a little bit. He said, a place like Harvard has more money in its endowment and more to offer the students that can be admitted than a lot of other places are able to do. And John, I think you ought to give it really serious consideration. And without that phone call, I wouldn't have applied. I certainly wouldn't have been called names on the 4th of July. And I really wouldn't have had my eyes opened to an opportunity because, like a lot of other kids, I thought I knew everything, didn't actually know much. And Dr. James Zuger called on that day and made sure I was aware of some opportunities. And by the following summer, I was packing my bags and headed back east. 4 years later, I was finishing up, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was still with that same wonderful young woman, and I had the idea that I was going to move back to the Midwest somewhere. And I got a call from a guy who's a really good friend from Albany. His name's Craig Gibson, and Craig said, John, I talked to your dad a little bit. My dad's, I think, always planning something for me. He said, I talked to your dad a little bit, and he says you don't really know what you're going to do after you graduate. Well, that's true. Said, well, I've got this Farm Bureau agency here, Farm Credit Services agency here, and I'm going to be retiring pretty soon. And it's the sort of thing I think you could do really well. And I said, well, that's very nice of you. And I thought, and I talked, and we went back and forth, and I didn't end up taking that offer. But years later, I ended up back in Albany, and next door to Craig Gibson. And so it may not have been a straight line, but the guy took an interest in me and let me know that I was wanted and needed, and that I could do a good job if I came back home. And that never left me. And I think as we visit with folks about rural workforce and healthcare, don't ever forget how important it is to tell folks that they're wanted and needed and would be appreciated and can succeed. And also, if you're one of those folks who's thinking about this right now, I hope you take from my message right now, you're wanted and you're needed. There may not be a ton of people who tell you that, maybe because they're intimidated, maybe because they're busy, they're trying to figure out what to fix their kids for dinner tonight or whatever else. but just know that you really do change people's lives back home. And I'm so lucky that two people had the foresight to take time out of their schedule and call me and set me on this path. And I hope to do that for others. So whatever happened, it worked. Jenny and John, as you heard earlier, we started our own little population health experiment. There are 4 little Doolittles. That's me as the Easter Bunny. Back when we could have Easter egg hunts without the fear of COVID, I was always the community Easter Bunny, and I will be again next year, I promise. But we're living and loving and doing the best we can. As you can tell, my wife, Jenny, there always appreciates me and supports whatever it is I'm trying to do. And we just kind of keep on keeping on, and doing what's right in her eyes is usually a pretty good North Star for me. But another one is to do whatever's posted on the walls of her mother's bathroom. So remember this, your mother-in-law always knows what's best, and Carolyn Holtman is no exception. And as we go over there and visit, I noticed what I like to call here bathroom words. When we talk to our kids, bathroom words or potty words are things that they shouldn't be saying, but these literally are words that I first read in a bathroom. And this is the old making a difference starfish story. So I'll let you read it here in case you haven't already started. The punchline here is, don't you realize, that there are hundreds, thousands, millions of starfish, and if you're throwing them back, you can't make a difference. And the little boy picks one up and he says, I made a difference for that one. And when we all think about impact, and we all think about living a life that we're going to be able to look back fondly and that others are really going to miss us, we think about mission and legacy. There are ways to scale where you impact hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, and those are all really good. But as the former superintendent of schools in Albany said when he was trying to convince me that it would be okay to move to 8-man football, and I was resistant, he said, "You know what, John? The big time is where you are." And Superintendent John Reinhardt was correct about that. The big time is where you are. And I would say that the intimacy and the connectedness of a rural environment, and the way that, your work friends and your school friends and your extracurricular friends and all those other folks that you might have in a suburban or urban existence, in the small town, they're actually all the same people. And there's a certain intensity and closeness of that I think actually makes it a little easier to make a difference. Even if it's for a smaller number of folks, I think the depth of experience is really a beautiful thing, and you have a wonderful opportunity to do. So you can see here, this was supposed to be in slideshow mode, so you can see some of my sloppy editing in PowerPoint as we do it here. But we're trying to have big successes, even if it's for small groups, right? We try and retrain a community to have really high expectations and to always remember that the big time is where you are. So we try to do things the right way. We try to make impacts on families and on kids. And the thought is that will certainly pay off culturally, and it will pay off selfishly for those of us who are in healthcare, as we convince people of the goodness of being involved and doing things the right way, that will sort of engage and excite people in the opportunity to really to make the big time where they are. And it certainly can be in these smaller environments. I saw Shannon Luke's name on here, and I also saw that Shannon was registered. Shannon Luke, some of you know her. I don't know if you know quite how decorated a high school athlete that Dr. Shannon Luke is or was. But a bit of her career magic as a high school basketball player took place in the gymnasium that's pictured here. Stanberry is about 12 miles from Albany, and most days of the year we like each other. There are a few days that we don't. But what you see pictured here in the upper left, you see Dr. Katie Dias. Dr. Dias is an Albany native who now lives in Stanberry. Her kids go to Stanberry schools. Her husband's the athletic director. And Dr. Dias provides incredible service and leadership to our entire region. She is a perfect candidate for burnout because she takes on every responsibility of the entire region. She's the medical director of the ambulance service. She's on the board of the local nursing home. She's the medical director of 2 rural health clinics. She was our hospitalist during COVID this year that gowned up every day and stayed in house and helped us take care of COVID patients. And she's also been, I think, a little bit of a mentor to Shannon Luke. And so what you see pictured here are the kids from the Stanberry School who participated in what we call the Tri-Learn-a-thon. The Tri-Learn-a-thon is a program we created, and kids receive an award at the end of the year if they run or walk 26 miles, read 26 books, and do 26 good deeds. And we do this across several elementary schools in the region. And again, our hope is that we as the healthcare entity in the region, we're doing these things in citizenship and leadership development and population health and trying to bend the curve on social determinants and health literacy and all these other really important things. And the reason we do it is because we can, right? We're resourced to do it. We're the healthcare providers in town, and we are afforded this wonderful opportunity not only to provide jobs and to provide care, but to provide an example and build a culture. And if we attract enough Dr. Diases, that magic happens. And so I'm hopeful. It's been a tough year for her, just the way it has been the rest of us. Maybe her more than most, because of the incredible weight on her shoulders all day, every day. But I think her smile here not only was genuine at the time, it still is. And I think she's living a great example. She's at one of the rural health clinics where she's the medical director is in Grant City, Missouri, which is in Worth County. It's all the way on the northern end of the state. Worth County does not have advanced life-saving capability in their ambulance district. They got a BLS rig. Dr. Dias is the medical director of that little rural health clinic. I'm going to show you a picture of it later in the presentation. And unfortunately, we had some tragic loss of young life in Worth County over the last few years. And we debriefed and we learned and we figured out how to be better. And we upgraded the clinic itself. We upgraded the equipment inside. And we started putting a full crash cart in that clinic. Not something you find in every rural health clinic, but something that we thought we needed to do in a place that was sort of geographically isolated. So here's going to be your first John bragging on his team story from a care environment. Dr. Dias and her crew were sitting in the rural health clinic in Grant City. And actually, because of regulations, they're going to lock the doors at noon. They got the posted hours on the door, and we're supposed to follow that. They were just about to lock the doors and take a short lunch break at noon. And in walked a man who collapsed on the floor of the clinic and said one word: bees. That was it. And they lost consciousness. Just at the beginning of the noon hour in Grant City, Missouri, in a county with no advanced life-saving ambulance capability, 25 miles from our hospital. And so, the guy obviously was having a reaction to what ended up being maybe 100 bee stings. I don't know. Managed to get himself to the clinic, and that was the outpost. And that place was going to be the difference between him living and dying. And Dr. Dias and her crew had the crash cart, had the know-how, provided life-saving care for that guy in a little rural health clinic in a town of 600 people. Dr. Dias hopped in the back of the ambulance, rode to the hospital, and took care of the guy. And I swear to you, the very next day, the guy showed up at the clinic with cookies, which I think they appreciated. Day before yesterday, in that same community, April 20th. A small child with a history of some really severe seizure disorder was having a really difficult seizure at home. That was one of several problems. O2 sats were down in the 60s. Things were really rough for this kid. And a call went to one of our other providers, a nurse practitioner named Kim Allen, who you're going to see pictured later in this presentation as well. And Kim was an ER nurse for us a long time, and then just went back and became a certified as a family nurse practitioner. She now practices in one of our other clinics. But the folks in Grant City know that if it's a weird time of day, the clinic's not open yet, and there's nobody else around, you call Kim, and she's worked a few codes in her day, both in our emergency department and just on a volunteer basis up at home. So she got the phone call. She went to this child. They tried to call for an air ambulance to come to Grant City, but it was snowing. The ceiling was low and the chopper wouldn't fly. So Kim did the same thing, rode in the ambulance, accompanied this young child to our emergency department. Children's Mercy dispatched their ground ambulance. By the time they arrived, seizures were under control. O2 sats were back up. The child was happened to be the kid's first birthday. We didn't exactly get to have our little birthday cake. We would have liked to have done so, but the child's awareness was good enough that kind of pulling at tubes and things like that, and the kids had a really nice outcome. And again, I don't know what would have happened if Kim hadn't decided to further her training and give people her cell phone number and make herself available. But I know that little kid was in really bad shape 2 days ago and made it safely to our emergency department because Kim was there. So I'm going to brag on my crew. Here's a picture. And we're a little bitty organization. Mosaic Medical Center Albany is a little critical access hospital. We have 4 primary care clinics across 4 communities, and this is our crew. And one thing I'll tell you about them, we've got the 2 docs there, Dr. Dias and then Dr. Angela Martin. Then you got Kim and you got Callie, you got Stacy, who's a PA, and you got Travis Knoll. And every single one of these folks had family connections to our region. Dr. Martin grew up elsewhere, but has memories of coming to visit grandparents in the summertime and things like that, and has cousins and other family in our area. And the other 5 grew up right there, within literally within 20 miles of our hospital. And the level of ownership and care and participation that they provide, it has to be unmatched. And I don't mean to denigrate any other small town or hospital or clinic or provider anywhere else. I just can't imagine people caring more about their patients and their community and their clinics than these guys do. And I always want to highlight them and provide encouragement to folks, to consider how you help bring folks along to go down this path. Dr. Dias was a candy striper in our hospital. She was an AHEC all-star. She originally headed down a different career path, still healthcare related. She was going to get into nursing. Somebody convinced her maybe to try and become a doc, and now she's like authentic frontier badass doctor. I think she would turn and say, "No, John, you actually just described Dr. Martin," and I did. We're blessed to have them both really heading up a lot of our efforts. So the question is this also our physician and provider team, right? So you got Dr. Dias there, and you've got a Shannon Luke lookalike. Actually, you have the actual Shannon Luke posing for a little pic here. I think this was on a med student rotation once upon a time in our Stanberry clinic. You've got Dr. Martin actually hosting students at her house, dissecting a chicken breast. And there are several other pictures and things we have here of just the level of engagement that we have from our providers in trying to host students, provide opportunities. We just did an AHEC pipeline event at our place about 3 weeks ago where we had 38 kids come in, starting IVs in a dummy arm, learning how to read EKGs, doing some exercise in an Alter G zero gravity treadmill. We had all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and our providers, after long days of work, were hanging out there, engaging one at a time with each of these 38 students. Really cool. So yeah, we hope that this is our team of the future, and that many of you who are participating in this, that you're part of somebody's team in a place just like this. So a couple more quick stories. I know there needs to be time for questions, and I'm hopeful that we can have a really nice dialogue and Q&A period. I'll tell the short version of this story, and the short version of stories is not usually my specialty, but I'll tell the short version of this one. Picture on the left is the old city cemetery in Albany, and it had just fallen into a terrible state of disrepair. And we had a maintenance crew, and we had a community relations person in our hospital who just really were bothered by the fact that the old city cemetery looked like this. And so they just came in, and this is before I was there. My predecessor, John Richmond, was the president and CEO at the time, and they said, could we maybe on breaks or something, could we take the equipment over and just try and clean up the cemetery a little bit? And John said, no, you're not going to do it on breaks. He said, why don't we as an organization take this on, right? So the old city cemetery was in a part of town that people didn't drive by a lot, things like that. But we took it on. We maintained it for about a decade. And then the City Cemetery Association got to the point where it could handle some of this funding on a go forward basis. But somebody asked John, "Why'd you do this?" And this was the answer. Because we can. Right? It is a very holistic thinking about how you improve communities and how you build culture and how you inspire people to be the best they can be. And again, being part of a progressive and strong healthcare organization in a small town. You just do things because you can. Talked about Grant City. So Grant City, like a lot of places, especially in northern Missouri, Casey's General Stores kind of came down from Iowa, and there were a lot of Casey's stores in northern Missouri in the 1980s. And then a lot of those stores got upgraded, but then maybe they're in communities that aren't always thriving, isn't always a logical organization to take on, the old Casey's store. Well, we decided that if we're going to be in a community, that community beautification is a part of that. We already had a functioning clinic in Grant City on the town square, but we were able to convince the folks from Casey's that this was across the street from their old store. It was on the main highway coming into Grant City, and maybe it'd be a win-win. If we could get the old building from them and fix it up and turn it into our new family care clinic. And we actually offered to buy it from them. But at the same time we offered to buy it, we said, we could probably make it a little nicer within the same budget if you would donate the space to us. And we promised we'd pay to really upgrade the look of this thing from the outside. So these two pictures are of the same building. And we're very grateful to the folks at Casey's for kind of putting their faith in us to make this donation and trust that we'd make it look nice. And we really have built a presence. And this is another example, I think, of folks in Grant City being able to say, the big time is where we are. And that's a level of leadership that we're very proud to provide. Okay, now we get into the tearjerker part of the presentation. I'm just going to warn you up front. I got two stories that I can't tell without crying. I just beg your forgiveness, I guess, but I'm going to keep telling these stories because if nothing else I've said has meant anything to you, I suspect that these two will. This is a picture of a park in Albany, and it's got some cool stuff in it. I don't know how well you can see, and I'm afraid I'm not the most proficient, but I'll try and zoom in a little bit on Zoom here and let you look at some more detail. This was a park that was kind of a big empty lot about 2 or 3 years ago. And honestly, I kind of wish it still were a big empty lot because the reason that it isn't is a really sad reason and a really sad story. There's a young man in Albany named Silas Lee Smith. He happened to be my mom's neighbor from across the street. Bobby and Alyssa are his parents. Will is his little sister. And Silas is a cool cat. Just one of those like super serious and yet super playful little 3 and 4 year old kids. Loved animals, always had toads and turtles and whatever he could find. And just a pure, beautiful soul that just loved nature. And everybody loves Silas. And Jenny and I have provided my mother with 6 grandchildren. I don't think she likes any of them as much as she likes Silas, her neighbor. He's a sweet little kid. But unfortunately, after his 4th birthday, Silas's parents started to notice some real changes in his balance, then a speech, and a bunch of other things. And Silas had a really bad inoperable condition that later led to his premature death. And for months, we knew that the most likely outcome was that Bobby and Alyssa were going to lose their son Silas to this cancer. And nobody knew what to do, because you never know what to do in a situation like that. Bobby's an Albany kid. He's a very highly decorated. He's actually the highest rank you can be as a non-commissioned guardsman in the state of Missouri. So he's risen through the ranks of the National Guard. Incredible recruiter, incredible leader, and just a super positive attitude. He's always been one of those guys. If something bad happens, you make something good happen. And I sat and had this conversation with Bobby about things with Silas. And he was resigned to the fact that Silas probably wasn't going to survive. This was what was going to take Silas's life, and it's probably going to be pretty soon. And he determined in that moment that Silas's legacy was not going to be one of this little boy who died prematurely. It was going to be of this little boy who lived this amazingly vibrant life and loved nature and wanted to give back. So Silas and Alyssa, or Bobby and Alyssa, excuse me, started this idea. They didn't want everybody's money to help pay for medical bills, but they did want everybody's money. They wanted our community to come together, and they wanted to build something that would contribute to our community and be a memorial to their son. And we had this big vacant lot in Albany that had been a park that had a plaque somebody placed there in the early 1980s, but now it was just kind of a place to mow. And our community came together. Somehow we sold $40,000 worth of pancakes one night. But beyond that, people just started showing up. They just started showing up to help. So these things that you see in the background, these big logs and this skid loader and these rocks and everything, this tree that we kind of laid sideways. Well, there was a storm that came through and this great big tree got knocked down. And somebody said, hey, I bet that'd be a cool thing to have at the park. So they loaded it up, put it on a trailer, drove it down. We figured out where to use it in the park. Local metal worker built this sign. People did all this work together. And that's a cool story about the way people pick each other up in a small town. That sign went up, true, but just purely coincidentally. That sign went on those poles the day that Silas passed. I say purely coincidentally. You can believe what you want about coincidences, but it was not planned to go up on the day by us that Silas passed. When Silas passed, he was at his home a few blocks from this park. When Silas was receiving treatment before that, and discharge planners were working on how he was going to spend his final days, the family was told that he probably shouldn't come back to Albany, or probably couldn't come back to Albany, because they had checked and Albany didn't offer pediatric hospice services, and that's what Silas needed. Well, I guess they didn't know about Dr. Martin. She said, we provide pediatric hospice services. I'll supervise the care. And the day that sign went up and Silas passed, he was with his family and friends, and his grandparents were able to go down and sit at the park. Because Dr. Martin said yes. And that's the power you have. All you guys on here that are thinking about how to spend your lives, I bet you Dr. Martin doesn't even remember doing it. I mean, she does stuff like this all the time. But this park is just down the hill from the hospital. And whenever new folks come to work with us, new ER docs will come in, and our emergency department's not crowded. We see 6 or 7 patients in an average 24-hour period. So we try and encourage people. They work 24-hour shifts. We try and encourage them to get out and go for a walk. Dr. John Owen, when he comes to town, he's the medical director at Liberty Hospital, VP of Emergency Service at Liberty Hospital. Great doctor, great man. And when he comes to town, we go walk laps at Silas's Park. And he tells everybody the story. And like I said, I guess I'm just proud to be associated um, with an organization, and particularly with a doctor that sees beyond the rules and the boundaries and cares about her patients enough to say yes and put herself out there in a circumstance like that. And that was some magic that was made. All right, I'm gonna try and make you laugh, and I'm gonna try and cry again. This is the last part. I love this slide. I love the heading, and I love the picture. These are my two oldest children. Shannon, if you're on here, even though Sarah looks just like her two younger sisters, that's Sarah. You can tell that that's Nate. Um, my wife Jenny is one of the most mission-driven, wonderful people ever. Um, and this is this is a pretty good description of how she's spent a lot of the last, I don't know how long, however long she's known me. She's cleaned up an awful lot of messes. Um, but she's gained incredible wisdom. And one of the things that along our journey of raising these kids, we ran into a lot of other good folks who were raising kids. And one of those other folks, I'm going to go back to the Silas picture for a minute while I tell this part of the story. Since I'm not driving through my slides, it's a little different deal. One of those people is named Jody Brown, and then she married Steve Carroll, became Jody Brown Carroll. And Jody, so Steve was this big, barrel-chested, red-haired, awesome beard, Nordic-looking guy, macho man. Jody's kind of quiet and unassuming. Steve would make fun of her all the time. Honey, I don't think we should have kids. I'm afraid they would have your athletic ability. That would be an embarrassment to the family. And Steve is a super nice guy. I don't want to paint him as a bad guy in this at all. But Jody would just smile, but of course, everybody in the room always knew who the stronger one was. So then they had baby Claire finally, and I think Claire's athletic ability seems to be acceptable, but I don't think anybody was really too concerned about that. They had baby Claire, and Steve was just smitten, right? The daddy's daughter thing was 100 miles an hour. So the Doolittles were building their family, and Steve and Jody starting to build their family, and we found out we were going to be having baby Sophia, and they found out that they were going to be having baby Will, and this was about the same time. So Jenny and Jody got to start talking through, going through pregnancy together, things like that. And we went for our 20-week sonogram and looked like Fia was going to be doing pretty well. And Jody went for hers. And baby Will was doing fine. But Jody wasn't. There was something they discovered there that led to some additional imaging. And unfortunately, it led to a diagnosis that Jody had pancreatic cancer. And I was just kind of learning about things. This is before I was really in healthcare. I didn't necessarily understand how bad that was, but we came to understand that pretty quickly. And Jody's father actually was very, very involved in healthcare. His name is Richard Brown. He was the head of Health Midwest in Kansas City. He's the head of the Stowers Institute, and a very well connected, powerful individual who would, of course, have done anything for his daughter, probably anybody else. But Jody was given kind of all the best knowledge that was available at the time, the best treatment options, the genetic profile. Again, Stowers Institute was a pretty good place to get information about what was going on. And Jody was presented with a choice. And the choice for Jody was, we're going to start your treatment. We could start now, but baby Will would not survive this. Or we can wait a bit until baby Will arrives, and then we can start your treatment. And Jody very quickly made the decision that baby Will was going to be born. And then she'd, kind of figure out what to do next. And so that's what happened. Beautiful baby Will was born in June, and very soon thereafter, Jody's aggressive treatment started. And they tried a lot of things, but the disease was very far along. And by November, Jody's birthday, we went to visit, and a lot of people were there, and we got to see Steve, and we got to see the kids, and we got to see the family. But Jody really wasn't feeling well. We only got to see her for a short time. And then we went back up a month or so later. At this time, they had moved to Wisconsin. They'd moved up there years earlier for jobs. We were physically separated at that point, but went through a lot of this stuff together. We went back up, and anyway, Steve, the big barrel-chested Nordic tough guy, told us a story about a conversation that he just had with Jody. And he told that story to Jenny. And the story went like this. Steve had been for months effectively trying to operate as a little bit of a single dad for a couple of young kids, and get Claire where she was going, and try and make things normal there, and try and take care of Will, and try and do a bunch of other stuff. And he was also working as much as he could, and he had good family support. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like they were up there all by themselves, but Steve was trying to do a whole lot of stuff, and sort of hoping against hope that everything was going to be okay with Jody. And usually, kind of stiff upper lip, doing the best he could. But as Steve told the story to us, he really kind of finally had a breakdown, just bawling his eyes out. Jody wasn't strong enough to verbalize much, and he was in there with her, and kind of sitting next to her, and he, as he tells it, he just kind of lost it. He said, I can't do this. I'm not gonna be able to do this without you. And he said, I have to try and find out what's best for Claire. I have to help her be normal. I have to try and have the wisdom of a mom. I have to do this. And for Will, I'm going to have to remind him of who you are and all this other stuff. I have to do this. And the way Steve tells the story, Jody stopped him. And I'm imagining, I wasn't there, but I know them pretty well, in a kind but very firm way, right? And Jody couldn't. She was pretty weak at this point. There weren't a lot of words about anything. And she said, "You don't have to. You get to." So my brilliant wife has made that her mantra. And it's one that I share with people whenever I can, and it's why I really am grateful to have been asked to do this. And if you want to do anything, just eliminate "I have to" from your vocabulary, right? It's all about mindset. The big time is where you are. People are going to get on your nerves. People are going to want more than they should. They're going to interrupt your privacy. They're not going to appreciate you for what you are. We just went through the Easter season, and if that's your thing, you just contemplated somebody giving the ultimate gift and making the ultimate sacrifice and being betrayed radically by a bunch of friends. I don't want to sell you a completely idyllic version of rural life. You're never going to go somewhere and be appreciated just for what you are. And the people, if you're listening to this and you're participating in this, you undoubtedly have a lot to give, and somebody's going to be lucky enough to work with you. And you're going to decide to go somewhere and deploy your talents and take care of people, and that's going to be awesome. My ask of you is that you, wherever you go, make it the big time, and understand how great you are, and really get this idea of you have to, out of your thoughts and out of your language. You're going to do amazing things, and just always remember, no matter how annoyed you may get, those are things that you get to do. And I think that's a nice legacy for Jody and others, if we can remember that. So I don't know what I was, I never know for sure what to say. And it's even harder in this case because I'm not in a room with you, and I didn't get to go around and listen to who everybody is and where you're from and what you want to do. And I'm sorry about that. But it is my sincere hope that I hoped you have a little picture and a little vision of what might be available to you, and maybe gain an appreciation for some folks who are already doing that. And if you're already doing it or you're thinking about it, I hope I give you a little strength for the journey, because whether people tell them enough or not, Kim and Dr. Dias and Dr. Martin and Travis and Callie and Stacy and all these other people doing this, man, they are making a difference. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, John. As always, I really appreciate that. And that last one always gets me, because I am going to put it back on you all because I see a lot of friends and a lot of familiar faces in the room, to help remind me every time I say, I have to do this today. Remind me that I don't have to, that I get to. And then I'm very lucky to be able to get to do the things that I get to do. So I put that back on you all to help me, and I will help you remember that these are things that we get to do, and that we are making a difference in other people's lives as well. So at this point, I would like to open it up for questions, for people to have comments or questions. We do technically only have 5 minutes left. So I know I have one real quick, John, because you are such a positive person. And every time I talk to you, you always have this positive attitude. But I know from life experience and just the way the world is, that there are times in everyone's life where we doubt ourselves, or where a community might falter a little bit. How do you address those instances?
I'm not good at short answers. I think about this a ton, because an honest reflection on the decade that I've been back in Albany has some really low moments. And I'm so proud of my organization. I'm so proud of my family, my wife, all these other contributions, that it really stings still, even though I know better, when people take shots at us. And communities do fall down, and people fail to show their appreciation. And sometimes you're the bad guy just because people want to be mad at somebody, and there you are. And I don't have a magic answer. I'll tell you the advice I give people. I don't always take it as well. Make time to show appreciation to others, and learn to nod your head and say thank you when people show appreciation for you. It is absolutely essential that we give each other strength for the journey. This isn't easy stuff. It isn't always fun stuff. And there will always be people to tear you down. If I tried to give you a short answer to your question, lately I was asked by somebody, how do you stay positive? Right. We've had some controversy recently. I had to separate a physician from our organization, and a lot of folks in the community did not feel good about that. And there have been some very personal attacks at me. And the question was, how do you stay positive? And my answer was, Jamie Gabriel is how I stay positive. Who's Jamie Gabriel? Jamie Gabriel works in environmental services at our hospital. Jamie is an Albany kid, and by her own admission, was headed down a really tough path. Battled substance abuse for a long time. Really was in a super tough spot in a lot of ways. 5 years ago, she had started down the road to recovery, and we hired her. And there were a lot of folks that thought we were dumb for hiring her. And this morning at our 7:50 a.m. huddle that we do at our hospital every day, where we all get together and talk about what's going on, she received a great big, I wish I had it here. Wait a minute. I can share my, I'd be showing you my email. Maybe I shouldn't do that. What she received this morning was a letter number 5 that was like 3 feet high that had been signed by 50 people. Not because it was her 5th anniversary working with us. That's actually coming up in a couple months. She's 5 years clean today. Now, if she weren't surrounded by positive and professional teammates, her life would not be where it is today. Her 7-year-old would not be where he is today. There's magic in what we do when we create great organizations, and people who choose to join in that alongside us and their lives become better as a result. It's a heck of a lot more powerful than what anybody wants to say on Facebook.